Be careful when you enter into Big Sky Country. You might just encounter some big mysteries. Thank you for joining me for another special episode of Big Sky Mysteries. This episode is another true ghost story researched and collected by Montana's very own Ellen Baumler. See the description below for more details. As we sit here with our technology, our internet, and our favorite YouTube channel, it is very easy to forget that not too long ago, Montana was a very different place. In the 1880s, Montana looked and felt like another world. Imagine, if you can, discovering the victim of a grisly murder followed by the trial and execution of the murderer. Then imagine that event sparking sightings of floating lights, possibly spirits, all around the murder victim's ranch, and the sightings continuing for months, and all of this witnessed by hundreds of Montanans and covered by the newspapers, with a prominent member of the church claiming they truly had no idea what the lights were. Welcome to Big Sky Country. Also, on a personal note, I'm dealing with a little cold, so I apologize for my voice being a little off. I'm getting better, so Monday's video should be better voiced. Thank you for your patience and your patronage. If you enjoy this episode, please hit that subscribe button and the notification button so you won't miss out on your next scary episode. Now, enjoy this true Montana ghost story. The Hanging of Peter Pelkey. Tales of spook lights, ghost lights, or earth lights richly embroider folklore and legends. They have been known to different ages and cultures by many descriptive epithets. Ancient Romans called them ignis fatuus, literally foolish fire. And in 17th century England, they were known as friar's lantern or will-o'-the-wisp. Scientists have various explanations for these phenomena, such as electrical discharges, St. Elmo's fire, organic luminescences, foxfire, temperature inversions, the moon's reflection on mineral veins, and modern-day headlights. Most who claim to have seen them remain unconvinced by these attempts to demystify personal experience. Across the United States, tales of such sightings can be found in nearly every state and county. In October 1894, for example, President Grover Cleveland saw a mysterious glow from a Pullman window as his train sped through the mountains of North Carolina. He immediately summoned the conductor, who informed the president that he had seen the Mako Station light. Reported in the press, it became the South's most famous ghost light. The light has been seen since the 1860s, when a freak accident took the life of conductor Joe Baldwin. The last car of his train somehow separated from the others. As another train sped toward the stranded car, Baldwin swung his lantern in warning, but the oncoming train did not stop, and Baldwin was decapitated. Observers say the light moves in an arc, like the swinging lantern. Until the tracks were taken up in 1977, the lights were mistaken for a real signal so many times that the signalmen used red and green lanterns to distinguish theirs from the ghost light. Other famous ghost light locations in the United States include Marfa, Texas, where the Texas Historical Commission erected a marker describing the history of the unexplained phenomenon; Silver Cliff Cemetery, west of Pueblo, Colorado, and Hornet, Missouri. Montana has its own tale of ghost lights. Ethel Kastner and Eva Stober mention one incident in their book, Belt Valley History. In 1917, several people reported powerful search-type lights circling over the hill and sweeping the city. The observers could not determine the source of the mysterious lights. Gene Mayer, in the Lewistown News-Argus, December 13, 1987, wrote of a strange light on his grandparents' homestead 10 miles south of Grass Range. Similar to the Mako light, it was like someone walking along, swinging a lantern. From 1907 until his grandparents left the homestead in the 1930s, the light was active. When Mayer happened upon the current owner in the 1980s and mentioned the mystery, the owner said that he had seen it too, but had told no one. Ghost lights also appeared following one of the most gruesome murders ever recorded in Lewis and Clark County. In September of 1880, authorities went to check on Charles Tack, whose ranch was in the Prickly Pear Valley about 4 miles east of town, just off the Bozeman Road. Tack's brother had reported him missing. After checking Tack's cabin, an awful stench led authorities to discover the rancher's bloody corpse buried under several 100 pounds of lime. Body moisture caused the lime to slacken heat, rapidly decomposing the remains. The murder weapon, an axe clotted with blood, lay buried with the victim, and tufts of hair and pools of blood revealed the path along which the killer had dragged the body. Pelkey's subsequent arrest, trial, and hanging led to a series of ghostly visitations witnessed by hundreds of local residents. Not only did the Helena newspapers report the supernatural events, but Father Lawrence Palladino, a well-known early-day priest and chronicler of the early church in Montana, also attended Pelkey before his execution and corroborated the events. Besides detailed newspaper accounts of the facts, Father Palladino wrote his personal version included in his history, Indian and White in the Northwest. The phenomenon was no simple haunting, and the events remain unexplained to this day. The period during which these events occurred, between 1880 and 1881, was an unusual time for several reasons. For one thing, the weather was extreme. There was so much snowfall during the winter of 1880 to 1881 that on April 18, 1881, a Helena Daily Herald reporter commented that the number of bodies beginning to come to light during the spring thaw was remarkable. Never in our recollection have there been so many cases of men found dead as this spring in Montana. And there were other events, too, that made this particular time period one of uneasiness. Thomas Edison had just introduced the incandescent electric light bulb to the public, and a new railway system stretched from ocean to ocean. By 1883, it would reach across Montana. Citizens correctly speculated that before long, new technologies would radically alter their lives. On the brink of these changes, the world seemed poised, teetering between a bright future and the abyss, much like that in the paintings that depict sailors in a ship about to fall over the edge of the world. A dire prediction that the end of the world would come in 1881 fueled the pessimism of some. Local papers from time to time discussed the 16th century prophecy made by a cave-dwelling recluse in Norfolk, England, known as Mother Shipton. The prophetess foresaw the invention of cars, submarines, airplanes, and even spoke of the western gold rushes. Like Nostradamus, she foretold calamities such as the Great Fire of London. Local newspapers speculated that the series of strange events related to the heinous murder of Charles Tack might have been connected to Mother Shipton's end-of-the-world prophecy. The crime itself came about in a bizarre manner. Peter Pelkey was a 24-year-old French-Canadian who drifted from the lumber camps of Maine to New Hampshire and Minnesota before ending up in Tack's employ. Pelkey's physician described him as a wild man who grew up on his own in the woods. Father Lawrence Palladino agreed that Pelkey never learned to restrain his passions. Tack himself was something of a recluse, a thrifty bachelor living in a very old log cabin despite the prosperity of his ranching enterprise. Pelkey and Tack made a strange combination, although the two seemed to get along well. According to Pelkey's account of the crime, he and his employer were in the log stable together. A number of hogs had died of cholera, and the two men were preparing to catch the remaining hogs to pull out their blackened teeth, then commonly believed to be a precaution against spread of this highly contagious disease. Tack bent down to catch a hog, and Pelkey picked up the axe to toss it out of the way. he accidentally hit Tack on the head, causing a wound that bled profusely. Pelkey claimed that the sight of blood made him so crazy and excited that he struck Tack twice more over the head, killing him. Then Pelkey feared the hogs would eat the body, so he dragged the dead man into the manger and poured 2 barrels of lime over the lifeless body for good measure. When Pelkey noticed one of Tack's feet sticking out of the lime, he took up the axe and chopped the foot off, then jumped on it to bury it in the lime as well. Pelkey had the presence of mind to rifle Tack's pockets, take what money he could find from the cabin, and make his getaway. But as Pelkey later told his confessor, Father Palladino, there was a witness to this ghoulish business. Tack's fine stallion was stabled in the stall next to the bloody, lime-covered corpse. Pelkey saddled the valuable animal, intending to ride hell-bent for Fort Benton, but the horse, perhaps in loyalty to his dead master, refused to cooperate. He constantly turned his massive head to snap at his rider's legs until Pelkey finally had to kneel in the saddle to protect himself from the vicious jaws. The spirited horse would only move in fits and starts while Pelkey beat him mercilessly. It took the horse and rider all night long to go about 18 miles. Pelkey finally reached the Dearborn Crossing later in the afternoon the following day, trading the horse for a swifter mount and $80 in cash. Authorities soon identified the horse as Tack's. Thus, they followed Pelkey's trail and arrested him. Once incarcerated in the Lewis and Clark County Jail in Helena, Father Palladino visited Pelkey and found him to be indeed a hard-looking case, seemingly stolid, stupid, and devoid of human feelings, uncommunicative, and incoherent. Father Palladino wrote that Pelkey's demeanor suddenly changed, however. On a later visit, Pelkey told the priest about a strange experience. It was night, and as he lay on his cot, wide awake, he saw a blinding light in the corner of his cell. The light struck terror in his heart. When it dissipated, Pelkey was transformed. The guards noticed immediately that his appearance had somehow changed, and he no longer spoke in grunts, but with articulated intelligence. Father Palladino gave him Catholic instruction, and a few days before his execution, the priest enrolled Pelkey in the brown scapular of Our Lady. The Catholic Church teaches that those who die wearing this scapular shall not suffer eternal fire. Pelkey wore the 2 small pieces of cloth attached with a cord over his shoulders to his execution. A reporter interviewed Pelkey the night before the hanging. The reporter asked the condemned man if it annoyed him to hear the men outside constructing the scaffold. Pelkey replied, "Not at all. I told the boys to fix her up in good shape. I'm afraid of nothing. I am chock full of sand and vinegar. I shall die game. It is no harder for me to face the rope than to eat a piece of pie." Early on February 4th, 1881, crowds of men and boys and a few women, whose presence shocked the reporter, thronged about the jail yard adjacent to the courthouse square. In a congenial mood, they packed so densely onto the rooftops of the nearby sheds to get a good view that several roofs collapsed. People plummeted to the ground, but no one suffered serious injuries. At 11:30, a blanket-wrapped coffin was placed under the scaffold. Jailers escorted Pelkey out of the jail at 11:45. The crowd fell silent as the death warrant was read. Pelkey bowed and nodded to several in the crowd. Father Palladino, Sheriff Jeffries, and other officials escorted the prisoner to the gallows, applied the restraints, adjusted the noose, and gave the signal. The sheriff cut the cord, springing the iron trap, and Pelkey fell through the opening. His heart continued to beat for 14 minutes, and at 16 minutes, doctors pronounced him dead, his neck broken by the fall. Burial records of the Cathedral of the Sacred Hearts show that Pelkey was interred under the name Peter Peltier in the Catholic Cemetery on Oaks, now the site of Robinson Park. His grave lies unremarked and undisturbed, as do hundreds of others somewhere in that residential neighborhood. Wild rumors soon began to spread throughout the town that in the dead of night, strange lights appeared on Tack's deserted ranch. They hovered over the house and floated around the property, sometimes gliding along the fence rail, over the fields, moving inside the house and stable. The papers reported the incidents in detail, and according to Father Palladino, the entire community became absorbed in the apparition. Theories to explain the strange lights included the connection to Mother Shipton and the end of the world. Some proposed that the lights were electric and had escaped from Mr. Edison's laboratory. Others believed that the lights were the ghost of Peter Pelkey, looking for the rest of Tack's reported wealth. Others argued that it was Tack himself come to check on his property. Numerous witnesses to the Helena sightings described what they saw. All agreed that the lights visited the various corrals and pens, the house and fields. The lights were erratic and periodically rose in the air as high as 40 feet. A neighbor of Tack's said the lights looked like what might be thrown from a red glass lantern at first, but grew paler and lighter in color as time passed. He claimed to have seen from 1 to 4 lights of an evening, and he first saw them when the snow began to fall. They moved independently in different directions, sometimes settling on the fence corners. Another neighbor said that he first saw the lights in the fall, and he was returning from town where he had sold some produce. They appeared to him as clear, bright lights moving around the Tack property, rising in the air, and eventually moving slowly out over the valley until lost to sight. The ghost lights persisted for several months. Hundreds drove out each evening to observe them, to the consternation of Tack's brother, who feared some tourists would accidentally set fire to the place. Father Palladino admitted that when he and his colleagues were asked their opinion about the lights, they would imply that someone who wanted to buy the ranch had simply made the story up to scare buyers off. But Father Palladino concluded in his narrative, "We must candidly confess that the strange occurrences has ever been, and still is to this very day, an unsolved riddle in our mind." Thanks again for joining me for another true Montana ghost story here at Big Sky Mysteries. If you enjoyed this episode, hit that subscribe button and don't forget to hit that notification button to know when your latest horror is delivered. For more information on Ellen Baumler, please follow the links in the description below. Want to hear your true or fictional scary story narrated by me on this channel? See the description below for how to submit your story. Again, thanks for joining me. Although the lights you see in the countryside are probably just the headlights from a passing vehicle. But what if it was something more? What if these lights weren't something man-made, but were maybe the remains of the essence of other human beings who have been removed from this plane of existence? Hopefully, they are peaceful, but possibly they roam the countryside looking for peace and completion. Or maybe they are just looking for you. I'll see you in your nightmares. Good night.